That's such a stupid fucking mentality. Like, the idea should be, what do we need to do right now, given the data that exists right now? Powerful people and popular speech doesn't need protection. The First Amendment doesn't exist for powerful people because you're powerful. Nobody's attacking your speech, right? You own it. You own the platforms, right? That's fine. The First Amendment exists to protect, like, by definition, unpopular speech. Unpopular speech is speech that needs protecting, right? This is why you would write or codify into law, defenses of this stuff.
Can you be anti-vax and still be a leftist?
So that's actually pretty interesting or crazy. So this would seem to show you that
the rest is a scare campaign, and I've seen them before, and the ultimate objective is...
I think I can be sympathetic towards Richard Wolff's position here.
We are not anti-vax at this show. We are anti-mandate, right? And that is supposed to be the lefty position.
Night chat. Good night, Stephen.
Dr. Richard Wolff tweeted this out yesterday, and it made some news. It says it's not pro versus anti-vaccine. The issue is class struggle.
I said good night.
Good night, Tabor. I'm trying to react. That's what you want me to do.
Its mandates become intolerable for employees, record job quitting, plus strikes, plus refusals of mass vaccine mandates. Say yes. So I just want to remind everybody that Dr. Richard Wolff is standing on very solid ground when he says this, because this is Dr. Fauci when he was first asked about mandates last year, about 10 months ago.
Why do people do this thing where to own somebody, especially in an evolving situation, you bring up things they said like a year ago? Why not, like, Fauci's probably made more recent statements about mask mandates. Why do you have to go back to 2020 to find something you said? Why not pull something more relevant? It makes me think that you're lying. It makes me feel like you know that this isn't his current position. And it makes me feel like you're just trying to find things for an own because you don't actually give a fuck what the fuck it is you're talking about. You're just going for cheap YouTube views or points.
12 months ago.
And do you foresee that the vaccine might be mandated for any populations, perhaps for school-age children?
No, I don't think you'll ever see a mandating of vaccine, particularly for the general public. Sometimes in the health sector.
Not to mention, what is Fauci even talking about here? When he says not a mandating of the vaccine, is he talking about a government mandate? Because my understanding is that a government mandate still isn't necessarily on the table, right? So far, it's been like different workplaces that have been mandating it, or there's like federal jobs mandate. But even so, even all of that aside, things change, right? This is a year ago. Why not find something more recent?
Like in my hospital here at NIH, you're not going to be allowed to go on the ward unless you get a flu vaccine. But you would never mandate, at least I do not think you would. I'd be pretty surprised if you mandated it for any element of the general public.
Now, as a primary care physician myself, who's had many conversations around vaccine safety with patients, I'm curious, what's our contingency plan for people who might refuse the vaccine?
Well, I mean, they have every right to refuse vaccine. I don't think you need a contingency plan. If someone refuses the vaccine in the general public, then there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot force someone to take a vaccine.
Right.
Okay, that was Dr. Fauci a year ago. Here's also Nancy Pelosi a year ago.
So here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated.
Okay, wait, and again, why a year ago? What is the point of this, right? Obviously, shit changes. Obviously, situations are updated. What is the point of this? Especially when you have like a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic that is constantly evolving. Why would you go back a year ago to pull quotes from people like it's some kind of own? Like, why not just find out what they think about it now? I guess unless we're being ultra-charitable, maybe your goal is to show that they... unless you're trying to say like they never originally wanted to be forthcoming about their position, like were they misleading you the whole time? Or is it that they're walking back promises? If we're trying to be really charitable, I guess, but...
Here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. It is a matter of privacy to know who is or who isn't.
So it seems like Dr. Fauci and Nancy Pelosi are talking about a principle. And those are the principles that lefties are supposed to be adhering to. And so that's not about, well, if the science changes, then we can mandate. That's not what they're saying at all. They're saying, no, you can't do this as a matter of principle. Joe Biden was also asked last year when he was president-elect. Are you going to enforce mandates? And here's what he says. Are you going to enforce mandates?
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
But now people are thinking differently. This is from the ACLU. It says, far from compromising them, vaccine mandates actually further civil liberties. They protect the most vulnerable people with disabilities and fragile immune systems, children too young to be vaccinated, and communities of color hit hard by the disease.
This branches off into like a way different thing that's not necessarily related to this. Man, dude, the ACLU has fallen from grace. Now, I personally am in favor of mandates because this disease and having to spend time on this, but I would expect the ACLU to be repping the other side of this. I think the ACLU, almost on principle, should probably be anti-mandate because they should be fighting for your American civil liberties, right? Not the right of the government to expand power and mandate shit against you, but probably the right of the workers to resist if they wish. This is a super duper ultra fucking weird tweet from the ACLU. I don't know. But the ACLU has gotten so unfortunately like politically corrupted. Oh man, it's actually so sad to see this. But whatever.
Now, what is the argument against that? Well, first of all, it's funny that they put liberty and mandate in one sentence. That's very funny. And Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA vaccine technology, anytime somebody says Robert Malone invented the mRNA technology, that's not how these technologies work. And he's not even the one that's given the most credit for the discovery of the mRNA or the invention of this technology. Don't say that. Nobody nobody invents like a highly complicated like piece of medical technology. Like this is the confluence of like tons of different researchers. It's so cringe that people give this Robert Malone loser so much fucking credit, especially when he's like a crackpot conspiracy theorist now. I'm pretty sure Dore has had him on his fucking program before to suck him off, but funny. And Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA vaccine technology, retweeted that and said, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. But here's the argument against what the ACLU just said. The argument, coronavirus immunity passports are not the answer. A system of...
Isn't the point to show that they will continually allow to encroach? This is just what I hear from docs in my hospital that wonder where this ends.
The problem is, what do you mean by encroach? Like, things change as situations change. I mean, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, oh, well, we didn't think this was this like 5 years ago, and now we don't want to encroach, so we're just going to kill ourselves now. Like, that's such a stupid fucking mentality. Like, the idea should be, what do we need to do right now, given the data that exists right now? Not this weird childlike game of, well, 2 years ago, you said you weren't going to say, okay, well, shit was different 2 years ago, right? I think a year ago, people probably thought when the vaccines came out, we'd be done and everybody would be over this. But that doesn't seem to be the case. We still have a lot of people that get infected. We still have a lot of, blow up spots in different areas. Like doesn't seem to be as handled as we would have liked it to be. I don't even know, when did the Delta variant even come into existence? I don't even think the Delta variant existed a year ago, did it? Like, obviously these things are going to change as time goes on. There's like 2 battles to play here. One is the like, okay, well, what are our good scientific ideas in terms of like how we approach things? And then the second thing is this like, this weird game of like, well, you said that thing, so now you're saying that thing, so I don't think you can say this thing anymore. It's like, okay, who the fuck cares? Grow the fuck up.
Of immunity passports in the United States.
Hold on. So for Doug Q in YouTube chat, so Destiny supports mandates but doesn't like the ACLU taking his side. Okay, the ACLU doesn't exist to represent the interests of the government. The ACLU typically represents the interests of citizens against the government. That's why it's called the American Civil Liberties Union, not the American Government Enforcement Union. So yeah, just because I support something doesn't mean I think every single person should necessarily be arguing my side of it, you fucking moron, right? Because I'm not a one-dimensional fucking nitwit like you are that thinks that if I have an opinion on every single fucking person in the universe needs to automatically agree and advocate for my position. Having a strong ACLU that fights back against the government, even if it's things that you agree with, is essential for ensuring American liberties because you want somebody to be pushing the other side as well to make sure that when you do enact things, even if I do agree with it, it should be done in the most like legislatively or constitutionally friendly way possible because you don't want the government to just go crazy mandating shit that it doesn't have the authority to do so. Okay? Fuck. I also think the ACLU is justified in defending the liberties of the immunocompromised. Why? Who the fuck cares? The ACLU isn't a medical organization. The ACLU isn't here to defend the immunocompromised. The ACLU is here to defend American civil liberties. That's in the name.
It threatens to exacerbate.
Clearly, I understand that things change, but how much latitude do you want to allow the government?
As much as we vote for them to have.
Sir, a system of immunity passports in the United States threatens to
you mind mentioning the other examples of the ACLU being corrupted and veering off of its original intent? So like 20 years ago, the ACLU used to defend like fucking Nazis, like doing marches and shit, or crazy like First Amendment people, like or like atheists or whatever, right? The ACLU was very much like, we're gonna find like arguably the most unpopular people in the entire fucking country, and then we're gonna go and defend those people and their civil liberties, because that's what the ACLU represented. But nowadays, the ACLU seems more kind of just like another wing of like the left, like Democratic Party, where they're like pro BLM and pro civil rights, and I shouldn't say civil rights because civil rights would be in the purview of the ACLU, but they're like pro like progressive agenda, blah blah blah, which isn't really I always reference this article, and we found it one time. There's a really interesting write-up from people that left the ACLU that have opinions on this. But I don't know. Like, I remember the ACLU growing up. Man, dude, a lot of people hated the ACLU growing up. Everybody hated the ACLU. Only one group of people really likes the ACLU, and that was libertarians, okay? Like, conservatives would hate the ACLU because they would, like, defend, like, atheists and crazy free speech. People on the left would hate the ACLU because they defend, like, Nazis and KKK. They'd be, like, crazy. Like, people, everybody hated the ACLU. But now the ACLU seems more kind of like a left progressive extension of, like, bullshit or whatever, yeah. Actually, I mentioned this so much, and now that they're brought up, I kind of want to just... let's read this real quick. Sorry. Once a bastion of free speech, the ACLU faces an identity crisis. An organization that has defended the First Amendment rights of Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan is split by an internal debate over whether supporting progressive causes is more important. And this is a New York Times article, so you can't accuse this of being right-wing bias or blah, 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 blah. It was supposed to be the celebration of a grand career as the American Civil Liberties Union presented a prestigious award to the longtime lawyer, David Goldberger. He had argued one of its most famous cases defending the free speech rights of Nazis in the 1970s to march in Skokie, Illinois, home to many Holocaust survivors. Mr. Goldberger, now 79, adored the ACLU, but at a celebratory luncheon in 2017, he listened to one speaker after another and he felt a growing unease. A law professor argued that the free speech rights of the far right were not worthy of defense by the ACLU and that black people experienced offensive speech far more viscerally than white allies. In the hallway outside, an ACLU official argued it was perfectly legitimate for his lawyers to decline to defend hate speech. By the way, also real quick, somebody correct me wrong. Hate speech is not a thing in the United States. It's not a real thing. There is no such thing as like hate speech. That's to be like defined on any private website terms and services. But hate speech is not like a crime in the United States. It might be in the UK or whatever, but there is not like a hate speech crime in the US. This is not like a legal thing. It's just it exists in the TOS in certain websites or whatever. Mr. Goldberger, hold on, let me qualify that one more. I don't mean to say that it's not real, that people can't be hateful or have like hate speech or whatever. I just mean it's not like a legally defined thing, okay? Sorry, Jesus. Mr. Goldberger, a Jew who defended the free speech of those whose views he found repugnant, felt profoundly discouraged. I got the sense that it was more important for ACLU staff to identify with clients and progressive causes than to stand on principle, he said in a recent interview. Liberals are leaving the First Amendment behind. The ACLU, America's high temple of free speech and civil liberties, has emerged as a muscular and richly funded progressive powerhouse in recent years, taking on the Trump administration in more than 400 lawsuits. But the organization finds itself riven with internal tensions over whether it has stepped away from a founding principle, unwavering devotion to the First Amendment. Its national and state members debate, often hotly, whether defense of speech conflicts with advocacy for a growing number of progressive causes, including voting rights, reparations, transgender rights, and defunding the police. These debates mirror those of the larger culture, where a belief in the centrality of free speech to American democracy contends with ever more forceful progressive arguments that hate speech is a form of psychological and even physical violence. These conflicts are unsettling to many of the crusading lawyers who helped build the ACLU. There are a lot of organizations fighting eloquently for racial justice and immigrant rights, Mr. Glasser says, but there's only one ACLU that is a content-neutral defender of free speech. I fear that we're in danger of losing that. Founded a century ago, the ACLU... This is the organization, said its former director, Ira Glasser, risks surrendering its original and unique mission in pursuit of progressive glory. Okay. Founded a century ago, the ACLU took root in the defense of conscientious objectors to World War I and Americans accused of communist sympathies after the Russian Revolution. Its lawyers made their bones by defending the free speech rights of labor organizers and civil rights activists, the Nation of Islam, and the Ku Klux Klan. Their willingness to advocate for speech, no matter how offensive, was central to their shared identity. One hears markedly less from the ACLU about free speech nowadays. Its annual reports from 2017 to 2019 highlight its role as a leader in the resistance against President Donald J. Trump. But the words First Amendment or free speech cannot be found.
Sup, dude.
Sup. Nor do those reports mention colleges and universities where the most volatile speech battles often play out. Since Mr. Trump's election, the ACLU budget has nearly tripled to more than $300 million as its corps of lawyers doubled. The same number of lawyers, 4, specialized in free speech as a decade ago. Some ACLU lawyers and staff members argue that the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech and press, as well as freedom of religion, assembly, and petitioning the government, is more often a tool of the powerful than the oppressed. I heard an argument a long time ago that has always stuck with me. This definitely comes from my libertarian days. But the argument that I heard a long time ago that I'm still like, I still feel is absolutely true. Powerful people and popular speech doesn't need protection. The First Amendment doesn't exist for powerful people because you're powerful. Nobody's attacking your speech, right? You own it. You own the platforms, right? That's fine. The First Amendment exists to protect, like, by definition, unpopular speech. Unpopular speech is speech that needs protecting, right? This is why you would write or codify into law, defenses of this stuff. First Amendment protections are disproportionately enjoyed by people of power and privilege, said Dennis Parker, who directed the organization's racial justice program until he left in late 2018. To which David Cole, the national legal director of the ACLU, rejoined in an interview, "Everything that Black Lives Matter does is possible because of the First Amendment." A tragedy also haunts the ACLU's wrenching debates over free speech. In August of 2017, officials in Charlottesville, Virginia, rescinded a permit for far-right groups to rally downtown in support of a statue to the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Officials instead relocated the demonstration outside the city's core. The ACLU of Virginia argued that this violated the free speech rights of the far-right group and won, preserving the right for the group to parade downtown. With too few police officers who reacted too passively, the demonstration turned ugly and violent. In addition to fistfights, the far right loosed anti-Semitic and racist chants, and a right-wing demonstrator plowed his car into counter-protesters, killing a woman. Dozens were injured in the tumult. Revulsion swelled within the ACLU, and many assailed its executive director, Anthony Romero, and legal director, Mr. Cole, as privileged and clueless. The ACLU unfurled new guidelines that suggested lawyers should balance taking a free speech case representing right-wing groups whose values are contrary to our values against the potential such a case might give offense to marginalized groups. ACLU leaders asserted that nothing substantive had changed. We should recognize the cost to our allies, but we are committed to represent those whose views we regard as repugnant, Mr. Cole said in an interview with the New York Times. But longtime free speech advocates like Floyd Abrams, perhaps the nation's leading private First Amendment lawyer, disagreed. The new guidelines left him aghast. The last thing they should be thinking about in a case is which ideological side profits, he said. The ACLU that used to exist would have said exactly the opposite. The 2016, a common enemy. Wait, hold on. Boom, okay. A common enemy. The 2016 election blew like a hurricane over the ACLU lawyers texted over the ACLU. There needs to be a different thing than a period to abbreviate shit. That's confusing. Sorry. The 2016 election blew like a hurricane over the ACLU. Lawyers texted one another in disbelief. A deputy director broke into sobs as he told his 4-year-old that Mr. Trump had won. Some staff members spoke of a nation irredeemably racist. Mr. Romero, who was a Latino and the organization's first non-white executive director, arrived at the office just past dawn the next day. He crafted a letter to Mr. Trump and ran it as a full-page ad in the Times, attacking the president-elect on such issues as immigration and abortion rights. If you do not reverse course and instead endeavor to make these campaign promises a reality, he warned, you will have to contend with the full firepower of the ACLU. The ACLU became an embodiment of anti-Trump resistance. More than $1 million in donations sluiced? I don't know how to pronounce this word. Sluiced into its coffers within 24 hours, and tens of millions of dollars followed in 2017, making the organization better funded than ever before. Salaries reflected that. Mr. Romero now makes $650,000, and some lawyers in senior management $400,000. Its 2017 annual report came with "resist" superimposed on an image, the Statue of Liberty. Jesus. When Brett M. Kavanaugh was nominated for the Supreme Court, the ACLU surprised longtime supporters by entering the fray, broadcasting a commercial that strongly suggested the judge was guilty of sexual assault. When a book argued that the increase in the number of teenage girls identifying as transgender was a craze caused by social contagion, a transgender ACLU lawyer sent a tweet that startled traditional backers who remembered its many fights against book censorship and banning. Stopping the circulation of this book and these ideas is 100% a hill I will die on. Yikes. The ACLU embraced dormitories set aside for Black and Latino students and argued that police forces were inherently white supremacist. We need to defund the budgets, Mr. Romero said last year. It's the only way we're going to take power back. Mr. Romero insisted that he oversaw no retreat from the fight for free speech and points to key cases to underscore that. In recent years, the ACLU argued that the attempt by Governor Andrew M. Cuomo of New York to deny the National Rifle Association access to financial services infringed on freedom of speech, defended motorists' rights to put the Confederate flag on specialty license plates,
who is he talking to?
And criticized Facebook and Twitter for banning Mr. Trump. I recall a conversation with a Planned Parenthood leader after we defended the right of protesters to stand outside clinics, Mr. Romero said. She was annoyed and told me, when you lie down with wolves, you wake up with fleas. I replied, if I have fleas, I wash them off in the morning. Wow, so deep. Still, many of the group's newly hired lawyers, the staff has grown markedly more diverse under Mr. Romero, who is the organization's first openly gay executive director, often are more energized by issues that range beyond and sometimes collide with free speech advocacy. Am I sorry that I leaned into our opposition to Trump? Hell no, Mr. Romero said. I'm asked, are we a free speech or racial justice organization? And I answer, yes, we are a domestic human rights organization. That said, in an interview, Mr. Romero acknowledged missteps. The ACLU in 2018 poured $800,000 into what looked like a campaign ad for Stacey Abrams during her bid for governor of Georgia. A questionable move for a nonprofit organization that calls itself nonpartisan. I probably would do a different ad today, to be completely candid, Mr. Romero said. The $1 million anti-Kavanaugh ad campaign, which compared his denial of a sexual assault accusation to Bill Cosby's incredulity at mounting allegations and Bill Clinton's lie about an affair, left some longtime lawyers inside the ACLU uncomfortable. No organization aside from the U.S. government argues more cases before the Supreme Court, and ACLU amicus briefs have drawn praise from even the strictly conservative Justice Clarence Thomas. I share the discomfort with the ACLU's engaging in partisan-looking activities. It risks taking luster off our reputation as straight shooters, noted Ben Wisner, the longtime head of the ACLU's Free Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project. Amici briefs. The money that flooded into the ACLU after Mr. Trump's election allowed Mr. Romero to flex the organization's progressive muscles and greatly increase the size of its staff. Many of the new employees, however, were not nearly as supportive of the ACLU's traditional civil liberties work. They worked inside their policy silos, focused on issues like immigration, transgender rights, and racial justice. Some fired off tweets like bottle rockets, causing headaches and confusion. This mark, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who survived a bout with the coronavirus, was conducting confirmation hearings for a former ACLU lawyer who was nominated to serve as Associate Attorney General, Rebecca McCrae. Rebecca McCrae, an ACLU editor, listened to the sharp tone of Mr. Grassley, a Republican, as he grilled the nominee and felt a flush of anger. She tweeted, tried to watch Vanita Gupta's confirmation hearing, but got too angry. That Chuck Grassley survived COVID. Jesus. Mr. Romero quickly apologized to Mr. Grassley's staff and took no action against his staffer. Asked about Ms. McCrae, he responded, she is highly valued by me. Those who control the official ACLU Twitter account can prove erratic at the national and state levels. In 2018, the Trump administration proposed revamping Obama-era regulations on Title IX, which set guidelines for investigations of sexual harassment and assault on campuses. It strengthened protections for the accused. The ACLU tweet in response to the news was scathing. This promotes an unfair process, inappropriately favoring the accused. Because the ACLU has championed the due process rights of the accused for 100 years, the tweet came as a surprise. It turned out that a staff member at the ACLU's Women's Rights Project had typed and clicked send. Mr. Cole, the legal director, saw the tweet, and as the organization addressed the issue going forward, it stated that the Trump rules offered important provisions that promote fair process for all parties. In another case, a police officer in Columbus, Ohio, fatally shot 16-year-old Makia Bryant as she tried to plunge a knife into a young woman. The ACLU of Ohio tweeted, "At Columbus police murdered a 15-year-old black girl." Here, too, was another example. in this case, an ACLU affiliate, of seemingly overriding its traditional insistence on the presumption of innocence. Videos show that the officer made a split-second decision, and murder is determined in a court. Mr. Romero was philosophical about the cacophony. My staff are the major consumers of freedom of speech within the organization, he said. But in interviews, several younger lawyers suggested a toll taken. Their generational cohort, they said, placed less value on free speech, making it uncomfortable for them to express views internally that diverged from progressive orthodoxy. A dogmatism descends sometimes inside the ACLU, noted Alejandro Augustin Ortiz, a lawyer with the Racial Justice Project. You hesitate before you question a belief that is ascendant among your peer group. Some argued for carefully vetting hires. I never do a job interview without raising Skokie/Charlottesville and asking if they are Charlottesville and asking if they are comfortable with that history, said a lawyer who asked not to be named because of the fear of inflaming colleagues. Not many colleagues agree. It's about the cause. Mr. Romero offered a verbal shrug. I reject that we need an entrance exam on civil liberties to establish the bona fides needed to work here, he said. The ACLU has in fact often glorified in its internal contentions. It split over decisions to represent the Nazis in the 30s, the Ku Klux Klan in the 60s, and the Nazis again in the 70s. After Skokie, a leader of the left-wing National Lawyers Guild complained of its poisonous even-handedness. In the 1980s, Nadine Strozen, the ACLU's former president, wrote an essay defending it against charges of trendy liberalism. All of this prefigured current tensions, not least the debacle at Charlottesville. Dissent from within. Less than 2 months after that terrible day in Charlottesville, Claire Gastanaga, then the executive director of the ACLU chapter in Virginia, drove to the College of William and Mary to talk about free speech. One of her board members had resigned after Charlottesville, tweeting, "When a free speech claim is the only thing standing in the way of the Nazis killing people, maybe don't take the case." Jesus. Miss Gastanaga planned to argue that by defending the rights of the objectionable, the ACLU preserved the rights of all. She walked on stage and dozens of students who proclaimed themselves allied with Black Lives Matter approached with signs. "Good, I like this," Miss Gastanaga said. "This illustrates very well." Those were the last of her words that could be heard. "ACLU, you protect Hitler too," the students chanted, setting up a line that stretched the width of the stage. They took in front of the stage and Miss Gastanaga and for half an hour blocked anyone in the audience from approaching and talking with her. She eventually left. "The revolution," the students chanted, "will not uphold the Constitution." The debate inside the ACLU proved scarcely less charged. People were rubbed raw, said Mr. Parker, who directed its Racial Justice Project and took part in these impassioned discussions. "I've never seen anything like it." A decade earlier, Mr. Parker, who is black, debated before taking a job at the ACLU. He had worried about representing white fascists of the sort who paraded around in Charlottesville. "I have a predisposition to be less concerned about the rights of people who would like to see me dead, and that did complicate my decision." So keep in mind, this is an organization who had a Jewish lawyer who was defending Nazis and the Skokie marches or whatever, right? But after Charlottesville, Mr. Cole wrote an essay in the New York Review of Books that defended the decision. "We protect the First Amendment not only because it is the lifeblood of democracy and an indispensable element of freedom, but because it is the guarantor of civil society itself," he wrote. That ignited anger among some 200 staff members who signed a letter stating the essay was oblivious to the ACLU's institutional racism. Oh, geez. The ACLU's upper ranks are diverse. 12 of the top 21 leaders are either Black, Latino, or Asian. 14 are women. David's approach fails to consider how our broader mission, which includes advancing the racial justice guarantees in the Constitution and elsewhere, not just the First Amendment, continues to be undermined by our rigid stance, they wrote. The ACLU held wide-ranging discussions with its staff, and summary sheets of those gatherings captured the raw feelings within. One group demanded that the ACLU no longer defend white supremacists. Another said top leaders are not to be trusted alone with making decisions on these delicate questions. The ACLU lawyers who defend speech acknowledge tension. "I don't sleep or eat well when I take cases defending such clients, but this is who we are," said Emerson Sykes, a black lawyer who previously worked to represent those who struggle for free speech and assembly across Africa. "I have worked in countries where the governments lock you up for speech." Other senior officials, however, pointedly distanced themselves from the Virginia affiliate, saying that it failed to recognize the nature of its client. They got snookered, said a longtime senior leader with the ACLU involved with many decisions over the years. We don't want to be in-house counsel for the NRA or the alt-right. AWOL on campus? 2 decades ago, as free speech battles erupted on college campuses, a new civil liberties group took shape to vigorously advocate for First Amendment principles called the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. The organization was purposely non-ideological and nonpartisan. A founder, Harvey Silverglate, had served on the board of the ACLU of Massachusetts and considers it an ally even as he sees its limits. When you deal with campus hate speech, you know they most often won't file a brief with you, Mr. Silverglate said. Mr. Romero, he added, is not a liberal, he's a progressive. His ACLU prefers cause work. It may be an overstatement. Mr. Wisner, who runs the ACLU's Free Speech Project, has represented the National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden and rattled off important cases his lawyers handled. But FIRE, he acknowledged, has taken a strong lead on campuses where so many consequential battles are fought. FIRE does not have the same tensions, Mr. Wisner said. At the ACLU, free speech is one of 12 or 15 different values. Traditionally, the ACLU state affiliates monitor and argue free speech cases, but in recent years, some shied from such fights. Here are a few examples. In 2015, University of Missouri students protested racism and established an encampment in a campus quad. When a student journalist tried to take photos and talk to protesters, students and a communications professor physically blocked the reporter from doing so. The ACLU of Missouri applauded the courageous leadership of student activists and faculty members, and 2 national ACLU officials wrote columns about the protests. They did not mention First Amendment rights. 4 years later, at the University of Connecticut, 2 white students walking home late at night loudly repeated a racial slur. In the ensuing uproar, the university police arrested and charged the students with ridicule on account of race. The ACLU of Connecticut demanded that the university hire 10 black faculty and staff members and require a freshman course on ending racism on campus. It made no mention of the arrests other than to opine that the police force is an inherently white supremacist institution. 2 days later, Mr. Cole issued a corrective. The student's conduct is not criminal, he stated. The First Amendment protects even offensive and hateful speech. Even the New York Civil Liberties Union, traditionally an independent-minded ACLU affiliate that has produced several national executive directors and stood at the forefront in defending free speech cases, did not want to talk about these issues. A spokeswoman for its executive director, Donna Lieberman, said, "We don't feel we'll have anything to add." Such reticence sounded like terra incognito to Norman Siegel, who led the New York group when Mayor Rudolph W. Giuliani tried to block the Ku Klux Klan from rallying downtown in 1999. The Klan was anathema to Mr. Siegel, but he fought like a cornered cat for its First Amendment rights. Did I give anyone else a veto? No way, he said. I would have compromised my integrity. Mr. Siegel, who was white, drew support from the black publisher of the Amsterdam News and from the Reverend Al Sharpton, a black activist who filed suit in support of the NYCLU. Mr. Siegel recalled receiving a standing ovation from a black audience. A woman came up and said, "You did the right thing. If Giuliani could shut down the Klan, he would do it with us," he recalled. Yeah, okay, sorry. I read this a while ago. I think I mentioned this on the screen, but I never read it. But this is kind of like an idea of like the changing of what the ACLU's mission was. If you're only like 23 or younger or whatever, maybe you don't remember as much, but I feel like I remember growing up, just like everybody hated the ACLU. They only cared about one thing, which was the First Amendment. And like, yeah. But, okay. Oh, this didn't make it to, our politics, 159 comments. I wonder what they said about it. I haven't heard a better take on where we are right now and how issues of free speech are different than they were before. Oh, nice. Or maybe. Oh, never mind. No, he's. Oh, this is a negative comment or positive comment about the article. 14 upvotes. Okay. My understanding is that America is relatively unique in our protections of freedom of speech. I do think that they go, I think, quite a bit farther than most other countries in the world. Like we don't like, I think it's pretty common across a lot of European countries that you actually do have hate speech laws where you can get in trouble for saying certain things or telling certain jokes or whatever. But so, I mean, it is a nice thing. Okay, sorry. Anyway, all of that to say, I just found this ACLU tweet cringe because it's not their job to be fighting for vaccine mandates. They should probably be fighting the other end for your civil liberties to resist said mandates. That's their job. But okay.
And Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA vaccine
I already said this. Robert Malone didn't, but yeah.
Technology, retweeted that and said, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength." But here's the argument against what the ACLU just said. The argument: coronavirus immunity passports are not the answer. A system of immunity passports in the United States threatens to exacerbate racial disparities and harm the civil liberties of all. Any immunity passport system endangers privacy rights by creating a new surveillance infrastructure to collect health data. An immunity passport system would divide workers into two classes, the immune and the non-immune, and the latter might never be eligible for a given job short of contracting and surviving COVID-19 if an immune worker is available to take the slot. Given the lack of scientific support for reliable immunity determinations, no significant policy decisions should currently be made on the basis of presumed immunity. There are better ways to both advance public health and protect individual rights that we should focus on in order to emerge from this crisis without creating a new privacy invasive data infrastructure that threatens everyone's rights. And who said this? Who was giving the counter narrative, the argument against the ACLU? Well, it turns out it was the ACLU. So that's what the ACLU used to always think, like all lefties think. But now everybody's changed their mind. From Fauci to Pelosi to Biden to the goddamn ACLU, which we know turned into a bunch of shit libs and because of Trump. So guess what? Why do you have a vaccine mandate if the vaccines no longer prevent transmission? So you're going to get, as Andy Slavitt, the COVID...
Why? You're a psychotic. He has psychosis. This guy is psychotic, okay? Why do people keep saying if it's not 100%, it doesn't do anything? Why would you mandate this if it doesn't do anything? Like, stop saying this. Please, stop saying this, okay? It's not 100%, okay? Of course it's not 100%. We know that. That's not an argument for or against anything. That's just an argument of stupid fucking shit, okay?
Director said, everyone's going to get COVID. You can't get away from it. It's like the flu. You can't get rid of the flu. You can't get rid of COVID. And the vaccine no longer prevents transmission. That's according to the CDC. Now, you tell me what the rationale for...
What does vaccines no longer prevent transmission? I mean, like, they never 100% prevented transmission. No one ever said that. That was never a claim ever, that they prevent all transmission. That's never, ever, ever been a claim, ever. That's never been a claim.
Mandates are. It's not about health. Because vaccines protect the person who got the vaccine. It no longer protects the person who didn't. So if you need the vaccine, you should get the vaccine because it will protect you from serious illness and hospitalization. But it will no longer prevent you from transmitting it. So a mandate to get a vaccine to protect other people is anti-science. And they're doing it. 9,000 New York workers leave as a vaccine mandate takes effect.
This is New York City workers. Didn't like 10,000 cops say they were going to leave, and at the end of the day, there were like 34 of them that actually left? Wasn't it like some really...
So those are cops.
Serious question. Can you be anti-vax and still be a leftist?
So there's an Australian guy that came on here named Kyosin AU, and he gave the lefty argument against vaccine mandates, which in a strong union culture can make sense. If you are a lefty, and if you are somebody that believes like in strong worker rights, then arguably mandates are bad because they take away some negotiating power from workers. So if workers want to, if jobs want to require you to be vaccinated, then maybe you should be able to get something. You should be able to get something from your job in order, you should be able to get something from your job in exchange for that negotiation, which is like an okay-ish argument, I guess.
Those are medics. Those are EMT. Those are firemen. Nurses are in short supply. Employers worry vaccine mandate could make it worse. Chicago school bus drivers quit in droves. Over the 10% of their bus drivers quit. Those are blue-collar workers of color. Workers rally against New York Presbyterian's COVID vaccine mandate for staff. And by the way, only 20%, 80% of the young black New Yorkers are vaccinated. So this is who this is a war on, young people of color. Everybody thinks it's dunking on Trumpers, but it's also dunking on the most vulnerable workers in our society. Here's the New York governor orders National Guard to fill New York hospital shortages caused by staffers not vaccinated against COVID. You're firing healthcare workers in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think this is about health. And you're replacing them with National Guard, who also are not mandated to be vaccinated until June 2022. Did you know that? That half the National Guard aren't vaccinated and they don't have to be mandated until June 2022. So this isn't about health.
What's it about, Jimmy? Tell us.
Black Lives Matter of Greater New York blast the vaccine mandates as racist and disrespectful. Is he a Trumper? Richard Wolff says it's not pro versus anti-vaccine. The issue is class struggle. Have employers...
I've met tons of lefty anti-vaxxers. Once you've sold yourself on one conspiracy theory, the rest just flow and easy.
Dictates mandates become intolerable for employees. Record job quitting, strikes, refusals of max vaccine mandates say yes.
Okay, I've got two things. I've seen across two different chats, people say that National Guard has to be vaccinated by November. Army outlines, the Army National Guard will have until June 30th of 2022. Wait, where do you see November? Why do you say November? Oh, this is the Army National Guard and Reserve soldiers. Guard airmen, blah, 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 the Air Force. Active duty airmen have until November 2nd. The Navy also previously announced that active duty. I don't actually know. Is the Army National Guard the National Guard? Or does everybody have a different National Guard? Is there like an Air Force National Guard and a fucking Navy National Guard? I have no idea. The Army National Guard is the National Guard. The Army National Guard have until June 30th then to be vaccinated. So that was correct. But they are only sending National Guard members who have been vaccinated for this. Oh, okay. Well, wait, can you link me a story on that? Hold on. Now I have to see if I don't need to see if I believe you. Fact check. National Guard members would need vaccination to help with New York health care. The claim, nurses fired for refusing vaccine in New York, can be replaced by unvaccinated National Guard members. The vaccine mandate for New York healthcare workers has sparked a misinformed conversation among social media workers. Or users, sorry. Nobody on social media works. By September 27th deadline, 92% of hospitals have received at least one dose. New York governor, okay, so the meme is, New York governor fired all hospital staff who didn't get the shot and replaced with the National Guard, reads the text in an image widely shared on Instagram. But the National Guard isn't mandated to get the shot until June 2022. Make it make sense. Fact check. The post, which accumulated over 1,500 likes as it was posted on October 1st, isn't the only one of its kind. Other versions accrued thousands more likes. This claim stems from a contingency plan New York Governor Kathy Hochul disclosed 2 days before the vaccine mandate went into effect. In it, she said the state could consider calling the National Guard and recruiting medical workers from other states or even overseas to cover shortages if needed. However, if called, National Guard members would have to be vaccinated, the state's health department told USA Today. USA Today reached out to the poster for comment. Hochul's plan includes preparing to sign an executive order to declare a state of emergency, which will allow out-of-state workers and other qualified healthcare professionals like recent graduates to assist New York hospitals facing worker shortages. However, they would have to be vaccinated in accordance with the vaccine mandate. Abigail Barker, a spokesperson of the New York State Department of Health, told USA Today in an email. Oh, cool. Yokel. Hey, this is what I said, how like if you actually just Google and read an article, you can be more informed than like even like the huge 10 million of you month commenters. Okay, so this idea that they're bringing in unvaccinated people to replace the unvaccinated people that just got fired is really stupid. But okay, all right. What was the other one? I think there was one more that I had a question about. Oh, how many New York police quit strike? So far, 34 police officers and 40 civilian police employees have been placed on unpaid leave. How about 10% bus drivers quit? Mandates. Okay, here's this. Chicago school bus drivers have quit in droves over COVID vaccine mandate. Chicago Public Schools has 10% of their school bus drivers quit on Fridays or unwilling to get mandated vaccines. They're not offering cash to... Okay, this seems to be true at least. 70 bus drivers quit in one day out of a force of probably around 700 drivers if it was 10%. Jeez, damn. Okay.
Richard Wolff says it's not pro versus anti-vaccine. The issue is class struggle. Have employers' dictates, mandates become intolerable for employees? Record job quitting, strikes, refusals of max vaccine mandates say yes. Anti-mandate movement is not all right wing or anti-vax. Its labor militancy component deserves interest and support. It's an important opportunity to fight the right and build the left. So let me, and by the way, let me just to drive this point home, you're going to mandate somebody who already had COVID get a vaccine, even though they have greater immunity than the vaccine provides?
So this was something that I think I've said before. So if you are infected by something, it seems to be the case that your body would be able to develop antibodies against like the 24 or 29 proteins or 27 proteins that the virus has. So natural immunity theoretically should yield greater protection rather than vaccinations that only target a single protein. So there's two big corrections on that. So one, I think technically your immune system isn't actually identifying 25 different proteins over the actual virus. It's just the 4 that are involved in the shell to get to get that strand of mRNA into your cells. RNA, I think. RNA. Right? I think a coronavirus RNA virus. So one, your body doesn't actually train against like all 25. It's just, I think it's mainly just the 4 that come into your body to protect the virus as it's on its way to a cell. Secondly, though,
with delta's R value being 6, wouldn't 100% vaccine coverage with a 60% effective vaccine just lower the R value to 2.3? It's not going away.
Nice. Ask your mom. Also, another thing is I think research just came out. So this is one study that is very new, but I think it showed that the drop-off in natural immunity was actually significant versus vaccines, such that it actually does seem like natural immunity is dropping off quicker than vaccine-based immunity is. And then, so that, which is interesting to me because it seems to be counterintuitive. But then I think it's a CDC study. But then something that I read was that, fuck, I don't even think I could get this from a YouTube video. You probably took like a whole course on this. I don't know how complicated this could get. Take everything I say with a grain of salt because I don't know if this is actually any of this is true. Okay, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. So something that I've read is that let's say that you get infected with the coronavirus. Okay, your body is going to see these 4 proteins that are encapsulating the RNA strand. Okay, it's going to see these 4 proteins. And it's going to develop a way to identify and counteract with all of these, right? Now, if you're getting the mRNA vaccination, then the only thing that your body is seeing is like the spike protein. So it's only one thing. So theoretically, the idea is that, okay, well, if your body sees all 4, it can develop more antibodies, that's fine. So something that I read somebody say this, okay? I read a random person say this. So this might be completely wrong. Supposedly, your body produces or can produce in certain situations the most easy to produce antibody that works, but might not be the most effective. So it might be the case that in identifying these 4 proteins, your body learns to massively produce one antibody that targets a couple of these proteins, but they're not actually the most effective ones to target if you were trying to destroy the virus or prevent it from making you very sick. If that were the case, then only seeing a single protein, arguably the most important one, the spike protein, which the virus needs to bind to a cell, to that ACE2 receptor, and actually inject its load, blow its fat load into your cell, arguably, or maybe inarguably, I guess, as more data comes out, just training your immune system against this one hyper-specific protein is actually going to be more beneficial than seeing the entirety of the virus and getting an immune system that sees all of these. Now, this is like the mechanical explanation that I've read. I don't know if that's 100% true, and this seems to get way farther into immune responses than I don't have the background for that. I don't know that. I just don't have the education, and I haven't like gleaned this from a YouTube video. So the CDC has a study out now that says that. Oh, fuck, did we even read this on stream? Fuck, my brain. I might have a brain lapse. We might have even done... I don't remember sometimes what I read on stream versus what I just read off stream because I talk about everything so much. We didn't read this one on stream. Okay. So I believe that with this study, when they were tracking hospitalizations and everything from people that had the virus versus people that had versus people that just had a vaccination, people that were naturally infected were having worse hospitalization outcomes upon reinfection rather than people that were vaccinated and had breakthrough infections. So that's actually pretty interesting or crazy. So this would seem to show you that even if you had like the Pfizer vaccine, 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and then somebody else had a full-blown round of the SARS-CoV-2 infection, the COVID-19 disease, if you were both reinfected, then the person who had COVID-19 is more likely to have a worse outcome than you who just had the vaccine. Yeah, okay. And I think that's what this study, and they tried to control for a lot in this too. Like they were going for, they talk about how, so previous infections with the virus, or COVID can provide immunity, blah, blah, blah. So they used data to examine adults. They were trying to take infections within a certain time period to rule out like other types of confounds and stuff, or to make sure people weren't getting false positives and then having like the disease later or whatever. Like, yeah. But yeah, so, okay. So it's still true that natural immunity to reinfection is probably stronger. It's just that natural immunity to hospitalization might not be. No, it was that natural immunity is inferior in both ways to the mRNA vaccines, at least. So you're less likely to get sick if you're vaccinated, and you're less likely to get infected if you're vaccinated, or you're less likely to get infected, and you're less likely to have a negative hospital outcome. Now, I will say, this is just one study by the CDC. That might change. So I don't know if this early release might mean preprint. If that's what that means, it's not actually published yet. So this might be garbage that just gets completely pulled, or maybe there is an issue later on with the study that they'll talk about, and then we found out that that's not the case. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. Yeah.
This was asked to Dr. Fauci by Dr. Sanjay
There was a
Gupta.
study that came out of Israel about natural immunity, and basically the headline was that natural immunity provides a lot of protection, even better than the vaccines alone. What are people to make of that? So as we talk about vaccine mandates, I get calls all the time. People say, I've already had COVID, I'm protected, and now the study says maybe even more protected than the vaccine alone. Should they also get the vaccine? How do you make the case to them?
You know, that's a really good point, Sanjay. I don't have a really firm answer for you on that.
Okay. All right. So now you know this mandate is complete bullshit and has nothing to do.
Okay, why not let him at least finish his answer? So like and by the way, I kind of agree. If you were infected, if we're going to do this passport shit, if you can prove a prior infection, I don't know. Fuck, never mind. I just remembered my counter argument for this as I'm thinking of this. So in my opinion, if you could prove a prior infection, should that not give you some credit for like a vaccine passport? However, the only counter argument that I thought of before is that, like, if we do that, are we encouraging people to get natural infections? Because if that is the case, then maybe that's not good behavior. Yeah.
With health, he doesn't even have an answer for a question he knew was coming because there isn't an answer for it. But he is captured. You know what a regulatory capture means? That's what this guy is. He's the poster boy of it. So now let me bring in Dr. Richard Wolff. Always happy to talk to him. He's the host of the YouTube show, The Economic Update.
Doctor. I mean, he is Professor Counts, but I just, that's very funny. It's very convenient. Sorry, okay.
Democracy at Work, author of many books, including his most recent, The System is the Sickness, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. Pleased to have with us Professor Richard Wolff. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Jimmy. Glad to be here.
So now how would you respond to the what you just saw here and the pushback you got from just saying that? Explain to people how about this is about class struggle.
Okay, I'd be glad to. I think the way to start is to recognize and to applaud, at least if you come from the political directions that you and I share, Jimmy, that there is a kind of rising of working people that we haven't seen in a long time. The government keeps these statistics about people who quit. We are having record numbers of American workers, many of them returning to jobs after the pandemic and taking a long, hard look at that job and coming to the conclusion, if I can quote from a country and western song from a few years ago, you can take this job and shove it. And that's what they're figuring out. Now, it's not the best moment. It's a risk they take. Jobs are scarce. But you know, when people have had it, when it has built...
Are jobs really scarce? Aren't there like millions of filled jobs at the moment? Are they really? We need to read more on like what is happening in the job market right now. Wait, no, we don't. Well, no, we always should. You should always read more. Unemployment in the US is really low, isn't it? I thought it was so high, but it's not. I think unemployment is sub 5% again, right? So I don't even know if yeah, I don't actually know what people are talking about when they talk about the job shit. Feels like we need more workers. We need more Mexicans. Right? Really, is it like we need to do the immigration shit, bring in more low-skilled workers, because traditionally people come from Mexico or how people were filling out their job shit before.
Jobs are scarce, but you know, when people have had it, when it has built up for too long and it's too strong, they may not choose the best moment, but they said, I'm out of here. I'm not going to be treated like this anymore. Number one. Number two, we're seeing a strike wave, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long time. You know, Kellogg, Nabisco, John Deere, there's a whole bunch of them, and many that we don't even know about that are smaller and don't get coverage. But I want to make a point about that. It is getting more coverage than labor struggles used to get. Yes. It's almost as though people in the media all over the place smell or sense that something is going on. And so for me, when I watch the working people that I know saying, I don't want to be mandated, I understand that it's mostly not about the details of the science. They're not familiar with all of that. It's not about that they don't believe in vaccines. They've been vaccinating themselves and their children for a long time, and it's a normal procedure of life. But they don't want to be told again what they must do by pharmaceutical companies and government bureaucrats for whom they have lost what little respect they had. And so they're pushing back. And if they don't get a vaccine, I think that's a shame. I'm vaccinated. I'm glad I'm vaccinated. I understand your position about it as well. But I don't see this as an issue so much of science or of what the CDC says. This is a movement that the left should be in there saying, you're right to be angry at mandates. That didn't have to be done. There's 100 ways you can organize to talk about and to work out procedures, have your different scientific points of view presented in a rational way, and then make a democratic decision that allows people the personal and private decisions they want to make. The rest is a scare campaign, and I've seen them before, and the ultimate objective is...
I think I can be sympathetic towards Richard Wolff's position here, even though I think his phrasing might be a little bit whatever, and that arguably it can be like a way to fight for labor rights and all that. But the way that he references the other side is really shit. That like, oh, it's a scare campaign, and you know, they don't care about the science. It's just about, and it's like,
in my mind, is to reestablish the ability of those who like to give other people mandates with a position to do so. And I don't think the left belongs there. Last point, I know the people on the right wingers and all, they want to get in on this too. They would like to move the anti-mandate movement in their direction.
Yes.
I get that. They want to do that.
Yes.
We should be in there saying, no, you don't have to go in that direction. You don't have to be an anti-vaxxer. You don't have to. This is not necessary. You can take that impulse, that feeling, and join with other people to change the system that oppresses you, and not to get lost in some detail of science and medicine that really isn't the issue for us at this time.
So, well, very well said. So you don't even need the fact that a mandate is you don't even need that argument, is what you're saying. And you're saying that it's a blunder of the left to cede this argument, this cause, over to people to the right, and then people will suck people because they're the only ones talking about it. I cannot, right. Richard, I couldn't. Yours was the first critique.
So if we ignore like this hyper-specific argument and we go back to like the macro political argument that exists right now, I don't think there's any path forward where people on the left can be siding with people that don't want to get vaccines because of the mandate. I think like politically, I don't think that works. It's so much like a culture left versus right culture war thing now. I don't think you can realistically maneuver that without just walking back on everything. It seems like you said before. I don't think you can do that.
I have found of any of the establishment COVID narrative policy from the left perspective. I haven't seen. I've been the only one out there that I know of on the left, and also we had on Michael Tracy. And only one from the left, and no one else seems to say. It's the same people who were telling you the truth about Russiagate, the same people who were telling you the truth about Syria, Venezuela. Those are the same handful of people who are telling you the truth now, giving you a critique anyway. At least there's a critique from the left on the establishment policy surrounding COVID and mandates. And I think, your credentials are impeccable, and you make the great argument that we cannot cede this to the right wing. And you do not have to push people away. I make the scientific argument that it's ridiculous. You're making the lefty critique that it divides class and it divides workers, and we shouldn't let this happen.
No, it's even stronger. It takes workers who are becoming militant, critics of the job situation, critics of the way they're treated on the job and by the government that the corporations control anyway. These people are beginning to move in quitting and striking. We should be in there. We should be applauding what they are doing. Sure, people make mistakes all the time, but I'll use your language, Jimmy. We're ceding it to the right. If we allow the liberals and the others to collapse the people fighting against a mandate as if they were all people who were, against vaccines for anybody out of some abstract notion of science that isn't supported. That's not necessary. We can be pro-vax, and you've done that well, without being pro-mandate. By the way, the whole history of the labor movement is not to allow the employer to dictate to you what you are going to do. And, I'm the person who believes that the majority of people have an interest in not letting that happen. Do I always agree with the target? No, and it doesn't matter. This is where people feel strongly right now. Just like those who are quitting feel strongly about why they quit, and those who are striking feel strongly. And that militancy and that criticism of how they are treated, that's a flower to be nurtured on the left, not to be dropped into a bucket as if it's undistinguishable from all of the rest of the right wing. And by the way, when anyone says that, you're doing the job of the right wing. You're helping cement an alliance between them and this labor militancy. And man, that is politically stupid.
So what do you say to people? I've seen Keith Olbermann tweet out when the policemen, firemen, and paramedics were marching on the Brooklyn Bridge. He tweeted out, fire them all. Same thing with teachers. They were like, hey, we got teachers who are they don't want to get the vax, fire them. Hey, we've got nurses that don't want to get the vax, fire them. What do you say to that? That to me is just so chilling.
Yeah, for me, it's a kind of a tragic slippage of these people and I'm trying to be polite, but there's a tragic slippage of these people into reinforcing the very authoritarian hierarchy that we ought to be critics of. You know, this is a system that really didn't do a good job. I mean, the most important historical fact here is this one. The United States has 4.5% of the world's population and 20% of the world's COVID deaths. The establishment that ran this program
is that one. I don't know. Aren't those numbers taking into account that everybody is accurately reporting all of the coronavirus deaths, which is arguable for like China or I think some parts of Southeast Asia. I don't know how much. I haven't looked into if people think those numbers were fudged or not, or what but
is a failure.
Yes.
And a failure is not the one you put in a position to be ordering everybody else around. I mean, we could be saying this without allowing anyone to portray us as being against a vaccine. You know, I have 2 kids. They were vaccinated when they were born. The doctors told me this is important. Smallpox, I don't remember them all, whooping cough. You know, we do that. We've been doing, I don't want to be put in that box. That is misrepresenting us, but that does the work of the right wing, and I think we should be very, very cautious about that, to say the least.
Well, I really appreciate you saying all that. That's 100% right. They'll mandate a vaccine, but they won't mandate you get health care if you get sick from the virus or the vaccine. They won't mandate that you have health care.
I mean, if you want to get that, by all means, good luck finding the power and the will in Congress to do it.
And we now know, due to studies, that when they did the study, 600,000 people in the United States had died from COVID. And they determined that a third of those people, 200,000 of them, would still be alive if the establishment, the oligarchy, the government would have given them Medicare for all. We now know that universal health care would have saved 200,000 people's lives, and they never talk about that.
Wait, can somebody source that for me? What is that number? Because you already have free access to emergency care. What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. But he must be referencing some study or whatever. Also, when you talk about mandating healthcare, if you're talking about the coronavirus, I mean, like, the vaccine is free, right? So in a way, I mean, I don't know.
Fauci talks about how to save lives. He never brings up universal health care, ever. So you want to give those people the authoritarian power to dictate to workers, and they've already failed us. That's exactly right. Oh, my God. You said it so perfectly.
Let's remember one little additional point, Jimmy. We've been closing hospitals in this country for decades.
Yes.
We've been closing them because of some stupid notion that this is quote unquote efficient. Well, you have to be a ghoul to have saved that money at the expense of the hundreds of thousands of lives, not just from COVID, but from God knows what other diseases that weren't handled properly because we didn't have the facilities in place. You're right. That's the mandate that might be arguably something for the good of the people. But that the government, having messed up on this COVID on a scale that's beyond words, on a pharmaceutical industry that only went to work on the vaccines when it was made a riskless, profitable venture by government contracts given in advance. Wow. And then to say they can mandate this one thing and not deal with all the rest of the problems. I mean, really, it pushes you to wonder the folks that fall into that trap. And my hope is that people...
Oh, okay, real quick. Somebody linked me this, okay? Roughly 40% of the U.S.'s coronavirus deaths could have been prevented, new study says. It could have been prevented if the U.S.'s average death rate matched other industrialized nations. Okay, thanks.
We'll see through it and understand that the argument about a vaccine is a different matter from the argument about allowing the corporate elite and the government bureaucrats to be mandating to all of us what we must and must not do, especially if the scientific questions are still open about whether it makes any sense on top of it.
Especially, and we've detailed that at this show, and the most recent year-long study revealed that vaccinated people are just as likely to spread the virus as the unvaccinated.
We could go digging for that later. I'm too lazy right now, but my understanding is that's just not true. I'm pretty sure it's been shown time and time again that if you're vaccinated, the viral load is less, your likelihood to transmit is less, and your likelihood of ever being infected in the first place is also less, meaning that you have far less chance of transmitting than a non-vaccinated person does. Unless he's talking about like a vaccinated person getting a disease versus a previously immune person getting a disease or something. I don't know.
The difference was negligible, 13% difference, which is nothing. So the conclusion of the study was everybody's going to get friggin' COVID, and not that study. Andy Slavitt said that. That's, by the way, accepted by all scientists now. They just don't broadcast that on CNN and MSNBC on a nightly basis, that everybody's going to get COVID. But Andy Slavitt, Joe Biden's director for COVID response, tweeted out, everybody's going to get it because the Delta variant is, and the vaccines don't protect against the Delta variant, even the boosters. They just make it so that you don't get serious illness or have to go to the hospital, which is what those vaccines do. So now even the CDC director admits it no longer prevents transmission. So you've got it right from the lefty perspective, and you've got it right from a scientific perspective. There's no.
I wish that he would like actually read through the shit on his show, but I guess nobody cares about actually doing that.
Reason to be for this, unless you're an authoritarian who likes to cede power to the oligarchy. That's the only reason. By the way, the oligarchy that has already failed our COVID response.